Well, there is nothing better than rising to the challenge. Except, of course, unless you're causing disruption, which is where I come in. I'm what they call a disruptor, and I'm here to give you 4.5 minutes of speed dating for speakers. Well, I couldn't help it. I have to disrupt a little bit. I've got to disrupt the whole process here. You see, to cause disruption, you need to have, first thing you need to have is incumbents. Second thing, you need to have an environment of change, where there's lots of change occurring. And where that change is occurring, you've got to look for the opportunities and take the technology that exists in that change environment and take advantage of it, and then build on that and make a change for yourself and for consumers. The 90s heralded a great period of change and a great opportunity to disrupt. And of course, there were incumbents. And in my business, financial services, the incumbents were the banks. And disrupting the banks and disrupting any incumbent, generally speaking, is not that a difficult process. There was a lot of liquidity in the world. The world was awash with money. Now, fast forward to today, 2015, the fabric of the world today is about disruption. Disruption in the 90s was something brand new. It was a naughty boy. Today is an accepted proposition. Very much so. And everything is able to be disrupted. There is nothing today that can't be disrupted. As Kerry Packer famously said in, I think it was the early 2000s, late 1990s, when he announced the entry of Microsoft and the partnership of Channel 9 or 9MSN and Microsoft, he said, "No one is safe." And he meant it. But there needed to be acceptance of this, for this disruption to work. There needed to be an acceptance by the buyer in the environment. The buyer must accept it. And disruption to work properly must have democratization. And what I mean by that is democratizing the product or the service for everybody. Faster, cheaper, better, more easily accessible. In the 90s, my company, called Wizard Home Loans in those days, introduced disruption into the marketplace. And in that introduction into the marketplace, we went about making lending cheaper, more accessible, and more available to everybody. What we tried to put into the past was that cap-in-hand approach of borrowing money. We try to empower the borrowers. And that still exists today. And that's a true test of good disruption. Does it still exist? We also changed interest rates. We made them cheaper and more affordable. Does that exist today? Yes. We also went about changing the disclosure environment about what real interest rates are and what the fees and charges are and what all the attachments are. And as a result of that, borrowers became empowered. We have people power. Today, borrowers can get onto the calculators. They can work out how much they can borrow and what they should be negotiating. Negotiation power. That's what disruption ultimately is designed to do. And Kerry's famous words that I quoted before were put into action when he bought into the Wizard business with me. And he bought in it for 50%. And together, we yelled and screamed and pitched and we disrupted and we changed the marketplace. We disrupted and we tried to democratise. Together, we changed the financial landscape. Really important to me. Who would have thought, a kid, and I often thought about this, how the hell does this happen to me? A kid who grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney, of a relatively poor family, with a migrant family, how did someone like I end up in partnership with the most powerful guy, the richest guy in the country, taking on 100-year-old institutions at their own game? Well, that's what I used to dream about when I was a kid. Not actually taking on the banks, but actually I used to look at my father, and every time we had to go and borrow money or we didn't have a car, I used to think about how can I change this stuff? It's not fair. And now that's my dream. That was my dream. I lived my dream. It's now my dream for lots of Australians. That's what I'm trying to do. That's my game. That's what I really believe in. Who would have thought that business that I started up, Wizard Home Loans, with Kerry Packer, that was a big deal. That was a heavy negotiation. Who would have thought he and I would sell that business 6 years later to the world's largest balance sheet, the world's largest company by market capitalisation? Who would have thought that we would have sold the business to General Electric, who was a behemoth in the financial services industry, the world's largest consumer finance company at the time, who also wanted to disrupt the financial services market in this country. Disruption is usually earmarked as the ability of the entrepreneur to make a change. Entrepreneurs, And entrepreneurs, generally speaking, back in the 90s didn't have such a good reputation. Let's call it a dubious reputation. And largely that dubious reputation came with the entrepreneurs from the 80s. Entrepreneurs now have grown up and are fast becoming the richest and most charitable and benevolent people in the world. You look at where most of the benevolence is coming in personal charitable contributions, it's coming out of individuals who are entrepreneurs. They are no longer fast cars, slicked hair. Their shape has changed. They have metamorphosed. They've changed themselves from a frog to a prince. They've become acceptable. They have matured. And in fact, to be a disruptor and or an entrepreneur now is cool. Very cool. As far as I'm concerned, very cool. They create pathways, and this is important. The entrepreneurs and disruptors create pathways to provide products and services that are faster and cheaper and more accessible, more readily available, inspiring on their way others to copy them. Now, some people copy out of greed, but some people actually get inspired by what somebody's done, how they've changed the landscape. And that's an important thing for a disruptor and or an entrepreneur to talk about, to inspire others to go on their own journey. This country in particular has a great number of small business owners, all of whom want to be an entrepreneur, all of whom want to control their own environment. So a new wave has begun, starting in the 90s as far as I'm concerned, of shape-changing disruptors. The journey in hindsight was full of adventure, like a game of snakes and ladders. Probably more snakes than ladders. We're in the banking industry, so it was a tough environment. Our biggest enemy was our own personal fear. Kerry as well. Kerry had as many fears as I did, and often his fears were transferred to me in not a very nice way. Our greatest ally was our imagination of what we could do. But the two are juxtaposed. The two are always fighting at each other. And fear is the great thief of imagination. And what we had to do was work out how to work our way around it, these two opposing feelings. Kerry was strong, powerful, and relentlessly seeking out his objective. He never, ever lost sight of his objective. Me, I was just a quick learner. I was fast on my feet. I'm an avid observer. And in some ways, I had a massive obsession and or fear of failure, particularly in front of Kerry Packer. He's not someone you want to fail with. And together, he and I proved that collaboration with a right business purpose, and that's important, a right business purpose. That is looking after people's hopes and dreams. That was our purpose. Not lending money to people for 30 years, as Kerry used to say. You don't lend someone money for 30 years because they don't want to repay you back, Mark. He said, what you've got to talk about is their hopes and dreams. And that's really what we're doing, helping them with the hopes and dreams. That's a right business purpose. And we collaborated together, and you will always succeed if you take that view of a right purpose and you never, ever give up. And you must prosecute it to the end. When is the end? It doesn't matter. You'll know when it's there, but you prosecute it to the end. Never, ever give up. Disruption was a pathway for me to learn about my own potential. And I was a disruptive kid at school. I was a disruptive kid at university. I was a disruptive kid at work, my first jobs. And I had to work out I couldn't fit into the mainstream. So I had to work out how I could use that to do something that could build me a career and help me make some change things. When I tried to disrupt, when I was disrupting at school, it wasn't because I was naughty. When I was disrupting at university, it wasn't because I was naughty. I was trying to make change. I couldn't understand the sense of a logic of why we're doing something. Now, I didn't understand logic as such, but it just didn't make sense to me. I remember it. I remember it well. So I dreamt about something. I achieved that thing. I did it through being a disruptor. And for me, not many people get a second chance to do the same thing again. Now, unfortunately, I have a company called Yellow Brick Road, which is born out of Wizard. Yellow Brick Road is the big brother of Wizard. It's doing exactly the same thing. It's a business about people's hopes and dreams. And we truly believe in people's hopes and dreams. We have employed exactly the same techniques that we use in Wizard to take that business from being a zero business to a $200 million market cap today in 4 years, and having $29 billion worth of assets under management from zero in that short period since 2011. And that company, again, I've repeated the same things over and over again. NEC, Non-Entertainment Corporation, is my partner. Macquarie Bank is my partner, and the public are my partner. And what are we doing here? We are democratising financial services to all Australians, because every Australian deserves a comfortable retirement, a roof over their head, and quality financial advice. Not just the rich, not just the privileged, and not just the educated. Thanks very much.